So, arguably, the most important vote in Nigeria since 1999 is up for grabs. And up for argument, the economy, insecurity, poverty, unemployment, fairness and justice, and restructuring, among others. These are issues that have got millions in Nigeria politically activated and perhaps outraged. But the ruling APC government seems desperate to reassure Nigerians that in spite of the obvious difficulties, they've laid the foundation for growth. And now they want to move on from austerity and turn the nation's gaze towards the more altogether cheering prospect of growth-driven prosperity to come, but under yet another APC government. And so, accordingly, the candidacy and the manifesto of Bola Ahmed Tinubu are being trailed as an upbeat campaign for a more prosperous future. But it just can't be as easy as that, can it? And it isn't, with many already suggesting that Mr. Tinubu's manifesto couldn't be anything but a campaign against his own party and the APC Buhari administration, under which there's been sluggish growth amid high oil prices, massive oil theft, inflation shooting up alarmingly, as are the prices of other commodities, while living standards are being squeezed, with households squawking at the pinch, and skyrocketing crime invading everywhere. So it seems there's a dilemma for the APC. Should it be a campaign that presents a rosy picture of the current APC administration with better days to come, or one that recognizes what many see as the dismal record of the past nearly 8 years? Well, to put forward the case for the APC and its presidential candidate, I'm joined now in the studio by the Assistant Principal Spokesperson for the Tinubu Presidential Campaign Organization, Ajuri Ngelale, who's also the Senior Special Assistant to President Buhari on Public Affairs. So we kill two birds with one stone.
Thank you very much for having me, Charles.
Thank you so much for coming in. Let's start with the absence of your presidential candidate, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from that Arise CDD presidential town hall event on Sunday. There is the impression that's growing amongst many on social media that he gave it a miss because he doesn't like to be interrogated. He prefers a controlled environment that he controls and prepares for on his own terms. What's your reaction to that?
Well, let me start, first of all, thanking you once again for the time, and second of all, just remarking that the introduction to the program was I would say, a much better attempt at the opposition's perspective than even the opposition had put forward up to this point. So I'd say well done on that. But fortunately for us, many of the adjectives and many of the statements made in the intro around rising crime, for example, are proven patently false on an empirical basis. If you look around the country, we'd seen a drastic reduction in instances of attacks of bandits, in instances of hostage taking and kidnapping. Obviously, with the insurgency in the Northeast, you're almost hearing no casualties these days with what we've been able to do with the extermination of both Boko Haram original as well as ISWAP. We've made a lot of progress across the board on security. Now, if you look at the economy, and again, I'm going to go ahead and get to the response to your question. We know that the international community is under a global squeeze. I know, Charles, that you've been to London in recent times. You've seen what's going on there, where they're rationing power in London. It's almost looking like NEPA is operating in London. These are international realities where you have these shortfalls of gas, rising inflation, rising interest rates. We know that this is a global phenomenon. Nigeria is no different. With that said, we have a record to run on, and we're going to get into that, whether it's infrastructure, social investment, MSME capitalization, the improvement on a security situation which had previously seen bombs going off across the country almost on a weekly basis. We're no longer there, Charles. So we're proud of our record with that as well. But we still have a lot more work to do. Now, to answer your question, you've asked about His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu's willingness to participate in the debate the other day. We were very clear in our statement as a campaign that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is not running from a debate. He is not attempting to godfather over or control the circumstances around interrogation or interaction. In fact, it is rather the opposite. If you look at his campaign calendar, you would find that we have made an unprecedented move to shift away from the traditional stadium rallies exclusively, and now we have actively incorporated town hall meetings with middle-income, low-income Nigerians. These are Nigerian citizens, not politicians, not a high-level elite media members. These are ordinary Nigerians that we're meeting, answering their questions directly and the like, in addition to the rallies. So we've actually tailored our campaign schedule toward interacting with Nigerians rather than the other way around. But,
yeah, but we haven't seen...
But now on the debate issue, just to answer your question,
right.
We're very clear that he did not participate in the debate for the fact that we do not believe it is wise or even appropriate or right to give any one media house, not to mention the name of this one, the overarching authority to be conducting national debates. We believe that no news network is more important than any other, and we believe that a time would come, hopefully in the near future, where we can get everybody together to have a common conversation in a way that doesn't favor one media organization over others. So these are some of the issues.
Well, the point is that this is a campaign period.
That's correct.
And the impression that's given is one of arrogance when you start ignoring things and you start, can I make the point?
Please do.
You start making the sort of remark that you made just now, suggesting that somehow there was you were kind of grading the different times when you would put yourself forward in defense of your positions to the Nigerian people. There have actually been several such interrogatory events that he hasn't turned up to, and the assessment of some very objective and very respected analysts is that he appears to have a fear of going to an event where he's not in control. Can you see how that might suggest that when a presidential candidate appears to be afraid of being asked questions that he may feel he's unable to answer, that raises questions about his capacity and his readiness for that office? That's the impression that's given.
Well, Charles, let me say that ignoring everything that I've just said about the fact that we've tailored our schedule toward town hall meetings with Nigerians to answer their direct questions, I think is something that Nigerians would take note of. It's important for us to recognize first and foremost that we have already had events where we were not fully in control, where he had engaged with various sections of the Nigerian population, where he has been interviewed directly, brought newsmen into his house after the primary, had a direct engagement with them, did not tell them what they should ask, did not give them any limits on what they should ask. Everybody was invited. Arise channel, I don't want to name everybody, but everybody was invited. The point here is there's nothing like grading. There's nothing like an imperial arrogance. It is an appropriate approach to take to say that Arise News is not more important than any other news organization. And we don't know, but we don't want to appropriate to your network or any other a kind of dominant position that they think that they are the ones who should narrate the political conversation of the nation. That wouldn't be right.
No, nobody's narrating the political conversation.
No, but if you have a moderator and you have a company that is all linked and hosting an event and they're coming up with the questions, directing the questions, then what about NTA? What about the other networks that would like to ask those questions?
But it's a bit like saying that you won't have an interview with a news channel. Why wouldn't you have an interview with a news channel?
But that's the falsehood in your position, Charles, because I've just told you that we've brought in newsmen into his house. We've had engagements not just in his house, but also at events as well.
Let's be clear on one thing, okay?
And we're taking up a lot of time on this issue.
Yeah, okay, but let's be clear on one thing and then we'll move on.
Right.
Arise News was not doing this on its own. There was a broad church of different media organizations as well as think tanks that came together to put this together. So it was not, it simply went on air on Arise News, but it was not an exclusive Arise News event.
But you recognize that the chief moderator was an Arise News staff, and you recognize, and you'd also recognize that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu was not the only presidential candidate who did not go on similar grounds.
But we have you here representing.
And now I've answered the question, so that we can now go into the manifesto, hopefully.
But let's just be clear that it wasn't exclusively a Rise News. You had people like
no, but I was talking
Bismarck Rewani, who was a part of the APC government.
Whether you bring
the APC government's economic council.
We know who was in control of the questions that would be asked and when they would be asked and to whom they would be asked.
All I'm saying is this.
Yes,
you need to keep in mind the impression that's being created.
Absolutely, which is why I've responded openly to your question,
Which is
Charles.
that if, as a presidential candidate, you feel afraid of attending something like a town hall meeting that happens to be,
same assumption,
that happens to be
again
on a Rise News, answer questions, how you intend to govern, that raises questions
we believe
about
that
whether
Arise
you
is not more important than everybody else.
Whether you are suitable for that job. But let's move away from that. Sure. The other point that you raised earlier, where you were talking about our opening intro, and how you thought that Nigeria is part of the headwinds that are hitting everybody around the world, and you have a point there. But the question is, to what extent? It's not about the problem; it's about the solution.
That's right.
It's about the way you react to
100%.
a challenge. To what extent can the APC Buhari administration tell Nigerians, hand on heart, that you've come up with and implemented a clear-cut plan to mitigate the effects of the global downturn and to help Nigerians during these undoubtedly difficult times?
Thank you very much. And this goes to the heart of the Buhari legacy and, of course, what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is describing to Nigerians in his manifesto. First of all, it's important to appreciate the fact that if Mr. President in 2015, before all of these crises even really set in, had not actively and proactively substituted our imports of several food products, such as rice, where we were paying up to $4 billion a year.
Yeah, but you guys keep talking about rice.
I'm sorry, you just asked me a question and you're interrupting me. I would like to.
I apologize.
It would be great if you allowed me to
take up that point. The price of rice has been going up steadily.
Yes, and I can answer that question, but it would be great if I'm not interrupted.
Okay,
right?
Go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. And this goes to the issue of when Arise is controlling a debate and they're not allowing for balance. These are some of the issues. So see, look at what we're talking about.
But that's not what happened at the debate.
But go on, give me a shot. Yeah. So this is the situation. Whether it is popular on Arise to mention or not, we did substitute $4 billion annually of rice imports with local production. Of rice and I will answer very straightforward answer, factual, right? It's the fact that we have had producers in the country who have benefited from government subsidies through the Anchor Borrowers Program, where we gave them seedlings, where we gave out over 1 trillion naira to over 3 million farmers, which is unprecedented in the history of our country. Some of them, not all, by the way, took those benefits, took those supplements, right, produced, and then because they were able to see that they could make more money over the border with their rice, they would take their rice on government subsidized production over the border, sell it at a higher cost. But guess what?
So you couldn't control your borders.
One second, please. That controls that creates a scarcity, which makes the value of it go up. That's one problem. The second problem has an international dimension, which is the fact that when you have global energy prices skyrocketing everywhere in the world, including places that you go to, you know that it's going to have a knock-on effect, obviously, on the end consumable product, such as rice, because it has to be milled, it has to be processed in a processing industry or factory that is run on what? Energy, right? So some of these things are not overly complicated, but what we are saying is it does not take away from the fact that if we did not have the billions of dollars annually that we were previously spending on 100% importation of these items that we're now producing, we would be in a greater crisis than we are now. That's number one. Number two, it's important for you to be honest with Nigerians about the fact that if you look around the world, and I was just clear on this the other day, Japan spent $43 billion in October to support its currency against the US dollar, the Japanese yen, which is currently trading at somewhere around 150 Japanese yen to $1. Just to support the value where it is right now, it paid out $43 billion in just the month of October, and that's just 1 month. My point is that if we had an excess crude account, right, that was established in 2004, and by the time Mr. President came into office in 2015, $107 billion flowed into that account when things were great and good, right? Unfortunately for this country, The PDP spent 105 out of the $107 billion.
We're going back to the PDP.
Well, it's relevant to
Which
this
was
issue.
there
No, but it's relevant.
8 years ago.
It's relevant to the issue because 8 years ago they spent all of our reserves, and the reserves haven't gone up because for first 6-7 years of this administration, oil prices have been historically low, and you know that, Charles. So let's base our arguments on fact and not sentiment. How about that? And then we can now look at the fact that aside from the agricultural issue, because what I've noticed, and I think everybody viewing this program now would see clearly that there was no allusion to infrastructure investment, no allusion to social investment, no allusion to MSME capitalization. All that was alluded to was gloom and doom, some of which was patently false in the intro. So I have a responsibility to respond instead of being able to state the case of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu in terms of what he wants to do in his manifesto, which is unfortunate. Now, if I have an opportunity to do so, I would like to tell Nigerians, on top of all the infrastructure, look, 5 international airports, 3 high-speed rail lines, none of which were in existence before Mr. President took office, with half the time and half the revenues and 2 recessions and 1 once-in-a-century global pandemic. I think the record, 16 years versus 8 years with what we've done versus what they've done, is very clear.
Well, you see, the test of all you're saying, I mean, you can reel out as many figures as you want.
Facts.
That's not the issue. The issue.
It is an issue.
No, hold
because
on.
if you say it's gloom and doom and nothing has happened, I have to correct you.
No, the issue is if you go out on the street. I challenge you to go out. Hold on a minute. I challenge you because that's what we do every day.
Well,
that's
first of all, the idea to paint me as an elitist that doesn't know the street is wrong.
No.
I'm not on the street just like you, Charles.
I'm not.
I know that there's hardship in the country, Charles.
I didn't say that.
All right.
I'm not painting you as an elitist. I'm just saying if you go out on the street, and you talk to people. I bet you most of them are going to say to you that things are worse now than they were 8 years ago. Well, okay? They're going to say to you that their lives are more difficult than it was. The things are much more expensive. The naira is worth less. And their lives generally, they're feeling the pinch of the economy and so many other things in a country where after 8 years, not one single hospital in this country, not one, meets the standard where your president, Mr. Buhari, feels confident enough to take his treatment. He has not put one single hospital in this country, and he has to go abroad for his medical
Charles,
treatment.
first of all, look, Charles, no, I'm going to stop you.
The
because
optics of that
Charles,
looks bad.
Charles,
You must admit that.
I'm going to stop you because what you're doing on this program is antithetical to professional journalism.
No.
You brought me to have a conversation on a topic that we were supposed to. I'm going to respond.
I did tell you
Charles,
you had to defend the record.
I am going to
because you wear
Charles,
both hats.
I'm going to respond to what you've just said.
But I would like for you to let me.
I would like for you to let me speak.
As well as a spokesman.
Charles, are you the guest or the moderator?
No, go ahead. I mean.
Okay, are you the guest or the moderator?
Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. You've asked me a question about his health, because what you're doing now is as soon as I want to talk about what we're presenting to Nigerians and what we've done, you now give me something to respond to so that I'll be defensive the whole 30 minutes.
No, because
I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, on the issue of President Muhammadu Buhari's health care, he has been very open with the fact that he has a relationship with his personal physician that predates his time in office. He's had the same doctor for decades. It is not within any constitutional obligation to drop your personal physician because you've taken up the office of president. Now, before you interrupt me, not everything is about the optics, Charles. Some things are actually about substance, which is why we have issues with Arise News sometimes. Listen, I want to be very clear about this. That's one factor. 2, we have a sitting vice president of this country, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who got a very sensitive leg surgery done at Reddington Hospital in Lagos. That was a facility that was not on ground before President Muhammadu Buhari had put in incentives such as tax credits and rebates to incentivize the construction of health facilities across this country. Now, with that said, I've just lost 3 minutes of time that I could have been talking about our manifesto.
No, but this is important.
If you don't mind, I'd like to now lay this out without an interruption, please. Where we have, what we are presenting to Nigerians, aside from, I'm just going to assume that all of our people know about our infrastructural record, our social investment, our MSME capitalization, our survival fund, and all the things we've done. let's go into what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu wants to do.
Yeah, okay. Let me
Right.
put that in perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because what, as I said, you came here to defend the record of
I
President
came here
Buhari
not just
as
to defend
well
his
as,
record.
okay.
I came here
No,
to
that's
also
what I'm saying.
present our
Yeah,
manifesto,
I
which I have
understand
not
that.
gotten a chance to do
And we're gonna
in
do,
25 out of 30
hold on.
minutes.
No, we're going to do that in a minute.
Okay.
But I want to be clear that
Right.
we made it absolutely clear to you that you would be defending
Absolutely,
the record
but not
of the
for
ABC
25 out of 30
as well
minutes.
as the other one.
But
So
yes.
let's turn to your methodology
Right.
in terms of how you intend to achieve a third presidential term for the APC. What is the central focus of your candidate's campaign manifesto,
Sure.
as briefly as possible? I understand that a central part of that plan is something he calls a consumer credit system.
Absolutely, Charles. This is something that we believe is going to be fundamental to the future of the Nigerian economy, and something that is totally a fresh innovation of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. We recognize a few things. Number one, that if we're going to truly fight against corruption in this country, we have to be proactive about it. We can't always be on the back foot, can't always be reacting in terms of just prosecuting people who've already done the acts and recovering their assets. That's one part of it. That's important, yes. But the proactive part of it is, how do we kill the incentive for corruption in the first place? That's where the consumer credit system comes in. We know that a major motivating factor for corruption is the fact that people have to pay their year's rent up front, they have to pay for vehicles up front, they have to pay for homes up front. If you're on a civil service salary, or even just in the private sector earning 300,000 naira a month, you can't do that. So one of the things we're going to do is, this consumer credit system is basically going to cover multiple sectors. One is, to start off, is you're going to be able, within your legitimate provable salary, right? You have your employment letter, your tax clearance certificate, your bank statements and all that to back you. You go to the bank. The banks are now going to be lending home mortgage loans, number one. They're going to be giving out loan agreements for vehicle purchase, so like lease to own. And then even for large-scale domestic appliances, such as fridges and freezers, same thing. Now, this is really critical to understand because it's a bit nuanced. The way this is going to affect housing, which is revolutionary, is His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is promising that on day one in office, he's going to work with the National Assembly to reform the Land Use Act, to standardize all of streamline and standardize all the processes of land access across all the states. We understand that it's a constitutional prerogative of the state governments to give access to land, give out land. But what we want to do is, we want to stop a situation where it takes 5 months and some bribes in a place like maybe Kogi or Rivers or somewhere, but in Lagos you can get it in 30 days. We want to standardize that across the federation, number one. Secondly, once we do that, the federal government is going to provide tax incentives, rebates, and grants.
You can calm down now. We're having a conversation.
No, I'm trying. It's passion, because I need to get it out, because I only have 3 minutes.
No, you don't have 3 minutes. You've got more than that.
Oh, do I have
Go
more
ahead.
than that?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I had 3 minutes left. So now, the second level is that we're going to give tax rebates, grants, and incentives to ensure that developers who are able to access this land once we've reformed the Land Use Act, we're going to give them these incentives in exchange for them devoting most of their developments not to high rises and mansions for rich people, but to social housing. That's housing for poor Nigerians, middle income Nigerians. We're going to create millions of jobs for urban youth in particular, we're targeting, to construct these houses. That's important. Now, you can't do that if you don't get an off-taker for the houses, which is why the third level becomes important. The first level, land use; second level, incentivizing developers to devote their developments to social housing. Now, the third and final level is, we're going to work with the Central Bank of Nigeria to offer incentives to banks through enhanced monetary policy ratios and better interbank settlement offers, in exchange for them devoting a particular quantum of their funds to loaning it of their lending rather to the real sector, to low income and middle income Nigerians, so that they can come and access these mortgages on these social houses. We can build a social house, Charles. And we started work on this in His Excellency the Vice President's office under the Economic Sustainability Plan, which was, how do we build a house for 7 million naira, 8 million naira? We found that you can build a 2-bedroom house that is perfect, beautiful, and well and good quality for 8 million naira.
we can hand out mortgages of 8 million, 10 million naira to Nigerians earning 100,000, 300,000. It's totally possible on a very large scale. It just requires concerted effort and determination by government.
So why didn't you do it under the Buhari government?
Well, there's a few factors there. One is we started the process of this, right? Because you have to, first of all, there are a lot of reforms that have to happen within the central bank and within the traditional banking system for them to even swallow something of this kind of an orientation change. They're used to lending to the rich. They're used to lending to companies who can pay exorbitant, returns on, interest payments and all of that. They're not used to lending to the real sector on a large scale the way it's done in the West. We have to incentivize that, and now we're working to do that. A big part of this also is, let's be fair about the fact that when we talk about the credit system, this is going to have a multiplying impact even on the automobile industry, because we recognize that if we can get millions of Nigerians into cars that they can lease with affordable payments on a monthly basis to own, then what that means is we can employ millions of more Nigerians to create and produce these cars within the country.
Yeah.
So this is going to be really I think the most fundamental revolution that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is going to bring to bear on top of the reforms that President Muhammadu Buhari had put in place. Now, the other thing I want to mention is in agriculture, because that's a major opportunity. If housing and automobile production through this consumer credit system that we're going to establish will deal with the urban youth employment problem or unemployment problem on a multi-million scale, then we're focusing on rural youth employment with his agriculture plans, which is a doubling down on the Buhari administration. How is this going to work? Right now, Charles, in this country we have 35% of all arable land in this country under cultivation, meaning that 2/3 of all arable land in this country is lying fallow. We just look at it. It's of no productive value. What His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is promising Nigerians, and they can hold him to account on this promise because he's saying it openly, is that by 2027, if by the grace of God he's elected in February, that by the end of his first term in 2027, he's going to take that percentage of 35% of arable land under cultivation to 65% of all arable land under cultivation, meaning 2/3 under cultivation, by massively employing millions of rural youth in this country, youth that did not go to school but are physically capable. We're going to get them in the millions out clearing lands across across the entire country. The reason why that's important, aside from employment, is the fact that you enhance wealth creation, you create new millionaires who are going to open bank accounts and pay taxes, which expands the tax net. In addition to that, Charles, is the fact that once we get all of our young people, our rural youths out there employed and engaged, the other part of this is that they are going to be a huge part of a blue-collar wealth creating generation. Because part of what he's saying in the education system, that's also in the manifesto, I'm trying to cram it all together, is that he's going to establish, and this is critical, technical and vocational centers of excellence in every state of the Federation, where Nigerian youths can finally have a choice. Right now in this country, we had an orientation, and you know this, Charles, as well as I do. Anybody with a Nigerian father or mother has dealt with this. There's an orientation amongst the old generation of our people that says that if my child is not a lawyer, accountant, scientist, or doctor, he's either failed or he's not doing well enough, right? We need to change that orientation. We know that in the West, we have so many successful people owning MSMEs in plumbing, in carpentry, in robotics, and so many things, agriculture, farming, and all of that. So this vocational and technical education, technical centers of excellence will basically allow for Nigerians who went to secondary school, who truly just don't want a 4-year degree, don't want to go to the youth service. They can now say, look, I want to learn a hard skill that I can go and open a business today and earn for my family. Okay. And we're going to equip them to do that.
In the UK, they call it BTEC.
There you go.
And if you're able to pull that off, that's a
It's a big one.
Good idea.
Absolutely.
But what I'm curious to be sure that you understand is that this election is a referendum on the last 8 years of the APC government. You're aware of that,
That's certainly part of the calculus, absolutely.
In that context, how confident are you of victory for your candidate in 2023?
We're very confident, Charles, for a few different reasons. I think, we like to level with Nigerians.
Now just keep it brief.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We do not have any, rose-colored illusion that everything is perfectly well in the country and Nigerians should be singing our praises. We are in a difficult domestic environment, a difficult global economic environment that has impact on the domestic environment. We're not running from it. But what we're telling our people is that we're not running against Jesus or the Prophet Muhammad. We're running against Al-Haji Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party. They have a record.
Well, that's not the only person you're running.
Okay. Well, we believe, okay, according to our assessments, our political assessments and developmental assessments, we believe that that's who we're running against. And I believe many Nigerians see it similarly. But
many people would consider that a mark of arrogance.
Well, not a mark of arrogance. We believe that if you don't have a manifesto out, Charles, if you have no state political apparatus led by any serious political contender of note, you're going to have a difficult time winning an election in Nigeria, Charles.
Well, that's why they say that a revolution is taking place. A revolution, they say, to get rid of people like those. The point is
Charles,
this:
if you're a fan of Peter Obi, I'm not trying to undermine him in any way.
My job is to be objective and to lay out the facts.
Okay, Charles.
So if you discount, and
forgive
there's
us.
also the NNPP.
Forgive us. Okay, forgive us.
If you discount those important people,
okay, Charles,
and gloss over them, you do that at your own peril.
Charles, forgive us for having our own assessments. We have a right to our opinion, right?
But you do that at your own peril.
That's our opinion.
The point is that, do you think the APC can manage to defy?
No, I was answering your first. I hadn't finished answering because you butted in to talk about Peter Obi. Okay?
No. I didn't butt in.
So let me answer your first question. Can I answer your first question? Did I answer your last? I haven't answered your last question that you asked me.
Finished.
Thank you very much. So this is the thing. You asked about a referendum. What I'm saying is that we believe we're running against the People's Democratic Party. We believe we know they had double the time. We know they had double the resources. We know that they cannot point to a single finished high-speed rail line or new international airport terminal out of the 5 that exist in the country today, because we did all 5 of them. We know that they cannot point to a deep sea port that they did because we constructed the first one done since 1979. We know all of these things, right? So we believe that Nigerians also see that.
Right.
Now, is that enough? We're not necessarily saying that all is uhuru. We recognize that the massive armament of the military and our success against Boko Haram and ISWAP and even bandits in recent times, that is not yet enough because it's not over. We still have work to do. What we are saying is that based on the fact that we've done what we've done in half the time and half the revenues, and we've achieved what we've achieved, when His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu comes to Nigerians and looks them in the eye and says, this is my manifesto, this is what I'm going to deliver, what are you going to be looking at, Charles? Or what are Nigerians going to be looking at? They're going to look at your credibility. They're going to look at your track record. And what our candidate, unlike the other candidates, whether it's Labour Party or PDP, I'm sure they'll have a different perspective, but unlike their candidates, our candidate will say, I inherited Lagos State when there was one ambulance in the entire Lagos State, where the civil service was wrecked, where the revenue generation was absolutely abysmal, where borrowing was the way of life, right? He has turned that into the wealthiest economy, one of the wealthiest economies in Africa. So he has a record of infrastructure, of safeguarding Lagos, making it safe for people to dwell in, and all of these things. So we believe that our candidate is the one with credibility to actually sell a manifesto instead of selling promises that he has no track record of showing that he can deliver.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Thank you very much.
You have to admit that you've had the time to put your case forward.
Well, fortunately, yes, but I had to rush the way I spoke, but that's all right. Thank you very much, Charles.
Well, listen, thank you for coming in.
Grateful.
And
Grateful.
Ajuri Ngelale is the Assistant Principal Spokesperson for the Tinubu Presidential Campaign Organization. He's also the Senior Special Assistant to President Buhari on Public Affairs. Thank you very much indeed.
God bless you, my brother. Thank you.